Okay, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, well, hello. This is Jeff Gaudiosi, and you are on MisplacedStraws.com, where music comes to life. And I have a very special guest today. Jeff Scott Soto first exploded onto the scene as the voice that nearly overshadowed Yngwie Malmsteen's guitar in the original Rising Force. And you've also heard him in bands such as Talisman, Eyes, Wet, Soul Circus, Journey, Trans-Siberian Orchestra, and of course the mighty Sons of Apollo, as well as his own solo career and his current band who just released their third record, Origami, Soto. So please welcome one of my personal musical heroes, Jeff Scott Soto. Welcome, Jeff.
How's it going, Jeff? With an intro like that, the interview's over. It's just nothing left.
It just summed it all up right there.
That's awesome.
But let's begin with the new Soto record, Origami.
Yes.
A great record. And it seems with each Soto album, the band gets a little more of a harder edge to it. Is that heavier sound something that you guys kind of plan going into the recording when it comes to a Soto project?
Well, yeah, that's by design, especially because it is a bit different than the norm as far as solo albums that I've been doing the past, I'm going to say 15 years or so or more maybe. There is a seed planted on that side already, the more hard rock, melodic rock type of thing. And I knew that I couldn't necessarily get away with another solo album that's so different and so much heavier, which is one of the reasons why we branded it as a band, even though I took the members of my solo lineup, the touring lineup, and we pushed it to become a band. But I also didn't want to add to the list. I mean, you already you tapped on a few of the bands and a few of the things that I've done in my career. I didn't want to add yet another name onto the list. So the manager I was working with at the time, a few years back, just said, why don't you simply call it Soto, because it identifies you're in the band. We don't have to tell the world that you're the singer. It makes sense that you're the singer. It's branded more along the terms of like a Dio or Van Halen or Doc and Wing, or so many bands that had a name that was from somebody in the band, but right. It was actually a band as opposed to a solo project or solo artist. So that was the main reason why we went that route. And yes, also to separate the genre that we're doing with Soto. I intentionally want Soto to be more of the heavier outlet for me, more so than trying to confuse it with all the other things that I've done and am doing in my life.
And now, when it comes to the band, this is the first record with Tony Dickinson in as an official member, even though he's right. done some writing for the band in the past. What's it like working with Tony in the studio?
Well, it was no different than when we worked with him before, just as a writer. The only difference now is he had a mindset. Before, he would write the songs and kind of send to us, and we could manipulate or do what we needed to with the songs themselves. Now he had the mindset of the way the songs are going to be presented by the band. So when he recorded them, even just the demos, just to send them my way, he made sure that they were in the context of it being the final product, so to speak, as the band would be doing it, as opposed to just doing it like he was writing a song for himself or just writing something to give me an idea of what the song should be like or would be like. So yeah, he definitely went into it with a lot more intent of it being a band sound as opposed to something just to give us the idea of what the song should be sounding like.
And Tony's an incredible musician too. For those who wonder where else they know that name from, he's also in Trans-Siberian Orchestra on the East Coast side. And Tony took over for the late great David Z. And I see that some of Dave's work is still on Origami with Detonate and Give In to Me.
Right.
Was that something you want to make sure you had on this record?
Well, and backing up just a bit what you said about Tony replacing David in Trans-Siberian Orchestra, I mean, that was one concern that I did have. I didn't want people to think that Tony was being asked or brought into Soto just because he replaced David in TSO, and David was also in TSO as well as Soto. We didn't want to make it look like, well, it's obvious since he replaced David there, he should replace David here. It had nothing to do, zero to do with that. Had everything to do with the fact that Tony's ridiculously talented, not only as a bass player, but as a multi-instrumentalist, as a producer, as a writer. There were so many factors that led to making him the only obvious choice to join the band, aside of the fact that we wanted to make sure he was actually interested in joining us, because he could have actually given us a flat no, saying he's not interested in being in another band, he's already got his own thing going, etc. But, by design, it just turned out that Tony was and is, and he's part of the TSO family. And when it came to doing this record, we did have a couple songs that Dave had worked on. We had one song that Dave had co-written with my drummer on the last tour that we did together, as well as the Michael Jackson cover of Give In To Me, which was his idea. He came to us with the idea of doing that song because it would kind of already have that rock vein, that rock fit, but he knew we could heavy it up and make it a Soto-sounding song. And he absolutely loved Michael Jackson, and so we kind of did that as I don't want to say a favor. We knew, we trusted his vision, what we could do with it. And so on both factors, I wanted to keep Tony's bass parts, I wanted to keep David's bass parts on the album. So it's mainly as a tribute to immortalize him, a tribute to him and what he brought to the band, and also to remind the rest of the world that he'll always be a part of this band. We'll always do and continue this band with his honor in mind. That's
for sure. And now, you've always had an incredibly prolific career, but just since the fall of 2017, you've put out 4 just incredible records with 4 completely different projects. Your solo record, Retribution, Sons of Apollo, Wet, and now Origami. With so many different and varied bands, how do you get yourself into the right headspace for the project you're working on?
It's easy only in the sense that the bands or the songs themselves put me in that headspace. It's the same as if you're in the car listening to the radio and you go from a Metallica song to an Eagles song, and then you happen to hear something by Maroon 5, and then the next song is, if you listen to various different genres and different styles, it doesn't change who you are, but it does changes the perception of what you're listening to. So when I'm listening to something that's completely different from the last thing I worked on, it just puts me in that mind space naturally. It just draws me in. When I'm writing and thinking about the stuff, it basically dictates to me exactly what that song needs, or what it's necessary to complete it. So if I hear a really heavy tune, something I'm working on with Soto, I'm absorbed by what I'm listening to. I can then finish that and go into something completely different, like Wet or a JSS or a Sons of Apollo thing, and that takes me to that place. It has nothing to do with, oh man, I need to finish this first before I can put my head and wrap my head around something else. This is what music does to me. It does this to a lot of people, and it gives me that opportunity to kind of change hats along the way without having to worry about, am I in the right mindset for it?
Well, and I guess that kind of leads into where I was going to go next when it comes to writing. When you write a song, and when you go into it, it's not like, okay, well, right now I have to write, a JSS project song. Is it just I'm writing a song and then later, like, okay, this would be great for Wet, or this would fit with Sons of Apollo? Is it just
being that I'm primarily a lyricist and melody guy, I don't even get any songs until whatever project or album that we're working on. I don't necessarily sit back and write songs just to write songs, and therefore I'm not collecting a plethora of ideas that I'll figure out where I place them later. Everything I'm writing, everything I'm working on is for the moment, for whatever I'm actually doing at that place and time. So when I'm working on the Soto album and I'm getting songs submitted to me, they're pretty much completed ideas, and they just need to be completed with the melodies and the lyrics. I'm not sitting there with a guitar and trying to create the actual music and the things. I leave that to the experts, the guys that know how to play their instruments. Trust me, I have a lot of songs that I have written, music and melodies and lyrics, and they're so general and basic. I'd rather have something more complex and something that requires real skill to actually play and write than to try and take credit for any musical ideas. That's why I primarily I let the guys write the music, and I just take over when it comes to finishing it off with the lyrics and melodies.
Well, and I think as part of that, you surround yourself with some pretty amazing musicians, whether it's the rest of the guys in Soto or the guys in Wet, or, just that immense collection of talent in Sons of Apollo.
I guess I'm lucky. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And, with Sons of Apollo, you guys had a pretty amazing year last year with the first record out. I caught your New York City show, which was one of the great shows I've seen.
Thank you.
You have a live record coming out soon with that band. When will we see another studio record or maybe even some more dates with them?
Well, as I'm talking to you, I've just finished song number 5 on the new Sons album. I'm still writing and carving and getting my end done on that because they finished the music, the basic tracks. They finished that a few months ago, and as I was leading into the release of the Soto album and all the promo and all a few tours so far, I've got my hands full in that sense. So now I'm really digging in, and we're completing the new Sons of Apollo record for early January release next year, and we're going to hit the ground running pretty much right as the album comes out. That was one of the downfalls of the first album. When we put it out, it was basically out in October. Mm-hmm. It was released in October of the year it was out, and as you mentioned earlier, my time with Trans-Siberian Orchestra was right around that time. We didn't get to immediately go on tour and start supporting the record. We had to wait until I was done, and then we finally got rehearsing and got that all started. And by then we lost about 3 or 4 months in very necessary promo time. So this time around, the guys they're respecting the fact that I still have TSO as a major factor in my life, and we've rounded up the schedule of the release of the album based on the next TSO tour.
And now you mentioned that they had the music done, and you have a few songs completed. Can we get a little hint of where it's heading? Is it still in that sort of heavy prog vein, or you guys looking to do anything new or different? Or
we could have gone cuckoo crazy with experiment going left field and sideways and doing all this crazy stuff to kind of follow up, but we decided instead to make it more of a follow-up of the first album because, again, we're a new band. For all intents and purposes, we treat this as a new band. We're not riding on the fact that it's the pedigree of this band sells the band. We still realize that we have to prove ourselves as a band. We still realize we have to prove ourselves as songwriters and that we can deliver great material, not just a bunch of great chops, which that's obvious. That's going to be a given. Right. So for the album, we decided it's probably best to just take off where we left off instead of trying to break new ground. We already broke the ground we wanted to break, and now we're just going to continue that ground and continue growing that tree that we planted.
And listen, one thing I really loved about that record is great a collection of musicians as that band is. The song came first. And that's something I think a lot of bands miss when, it's always, look how great my guitar player is or my bass player is. You guys had the song first, and I think that really came through on that project.
I appreciate that, and that's obviously what we're going for. That's very important to us, that we achieve that level, that people realize that the music comes first. It's the chops, that's a given. We can take a great song and add chop central, as long as the actual song is there first.
And let's go way back for a minute. While you're gonna on the line here, we'll take a little walk through the career.
You're gonna show how old I truly am now.
We'll show how old I truly am. Now, your vocals on the first 2 Rising Force records are, to me, just legendary. A lot of musicians of a certain age talk about, when they saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan, that's when they decided that this is what I want to do. For me, and probably a lot of guys my age, hearing the scream that starts marching out is my Beatles on Ed Sullivan moment.
Man, that really means a lot.
What do you remember about that time as you were starting off? How did you come to be on those records?
Well, to be honest with you, I remember it being no different than what I'm doing now. It's strangely enough, when I reflect back, of course, I have to agree. I look back at that time and I realize that we set a bar. We were basically, I was 19, or I was 18 when I joined Ingve, but 19 on the Marching Out album. So we were just kids. We were young, crazy musicians. I mean, these guys were, again, at the top of their game, the guys that Ingve brought into the fold. Ingve himself was right at the very beginning stages of setting the world on fire yet again musically, because you have your pioneers through the history of time that have been a generation changer, and Ingve was one of those. But as we were doing that stuff, we were treating it the same way I'm treating anything I'm doing today. I'm just doing it based on the love for it, based on the admiration for music and wanting to do what we do as well as we can do it. We never set out to say, we're going to create history here. We're going to be setting the world on fire. That just happened to happen. And now I can listen back to those records. Now I can go back to that time and realize, holy shit, how the hell did we do this? Because we didn't have that mindset of thinking we were doing anything other than just what we wanted to do. Ingve had a vision, he had a plan, and we were there to implement it with him. And it's exactly what we did. And of course, when I hear stuff like what you just said, it truly resonates that I was part of something that was game-changing, and that it really just, it hits me more now than it hit me back then. Because, you know, as I'm talking about the new Soto album, if something happened where it got so discovered to the point where it was a game-changer as well, I wouldn't even be able to enjoy that until much later in life, as I'm enjoying the releases and the early works that I did with Ingve.
Well, and I think another band that just really never got its due in America was your time in Talisman.
Correct.
On the Soto tour, around the Divac album, you know, you played the medley of classic songs from Talisman, which, you know, as somebody in the audience, I thought I would never hear here in America. What was the reaction of the audience when you played that Talisman material that a lot of people are hearing for the first time live?
Oh yeah, it's exactly as you put it, and it's certainly more of a cult following in the U.S. for Talisman. The majority of the following for that band was abroad, whether it be Europe, South America, Japan, that kind of thing. And we never had any releases in the U.S. And obviously, with the way the internet changed the way we're doing music today, that helped tremendously. People discover Talisman, because back in the old days, people bought their records at record stores, and if you can't find a record at a record store, you have no chance of discovering it. Now the only chances of discovering new music, or majority, is through the apps like Spotify and of course eBay and things like Amazon. Yeah. So from that, you actually have a chance to reach out, or people are talking about the band. It's so easy now to find and discover this band. So it was a struggle for us trying to get the U.S. on board, you know, bringing them into the party, and it's a real pity too. But there are enough diehard fans that have followed my career through the trenches, through the decades, whatever you want to call it, that know of Talisman. And unfortunately, because we have such a big body of work, it's impossible to please those audiences. Well, they want to hear this song. Well, they'd rather hear that song. So that's where the whole medley idea came from. It's like, well, guess what? We're going to play them all. We're going to play any of the songs that you might have been familiar with of Talisman, and we're going to put it into a 15-minute block, whether you like it or not.
Well, and it's funny, because listening to the new record, Hypermania, you know, to my ears, took me back to the Talisman stuff. And to me, there's definitely a Talisman vibe when I first heard Hypermania. So, you know, it's always good to hear bits and pieces of that leak through as your career goes on.
Well, I got to be honest, the song World Gone Colder on the new Soto album, that reminded me a hell of a lot more on the Talisman, and it's one of the reasons why I really wanted to do the song. They weren't writing intentionally to sound like Talisman. Yeah. Well, I remember the initial demos when it came in, and the song was in the raw stages. I'm like, oh my God, it's kind of freaking me out, because this sounds like something Marcel would have written, and it's one of the reasons why we absolutely had to put that song on the record.
That's a great song too.
Thanks.
And now, Soto, the band, you guys recently completed a short South American tour. Will we get a chance to see the band stateside in the near future?
Sadly, at the moment, the harsh reality is no, mainly because I've tried several times to do trial runs here in the U.S., and the U.S. hasn't really caught up to me. It hasn't caught up to the things that I've done, hasn't caught up to the releases or even the appreciation of what we're trying to do just yet. And that's one of the reasons why I refuse to let this band just go away by the, I've put so much energy and time and years into establishing this band, and I think we actually can break some ground here in the U.S., but it's slow to come to the table, and this is why now we even with the new deal, with the new label, we actually have a chance of slowly seeping in until the U.S. catches up with me and catches up with what we're doing, and there's a demand for it. I have to say no because it's not it's not rocket science to know that it requires X amount of dollars to put a band on tour and to keep a band on tour. You can't lose money when you're on the tour. You can't be paying to play. And also, I kind of feel kind of flattened when I go into a crowd or go into a venue and I'm playing in front of 40 people. I'd really like to play in front of a lot of people or enough people that it doesn't look lame. So at the moment, we're kind of waiting until the U.S. catches up with us, and until then, we're just going to keep chiseling away, and hopefully we'll be able to get to that point where we can tour the U.S.
I hope so. And now, will you guys be doing any other European dates or anything like that, or is it just kind of a wait and see how the record catches?
Yeah, we're about to announce the European tour, I think, tomorrow or Thursday morning. I don't remember exactly what the launch date is. I haven't caught up with everything and everyone just yet. But, yeah, we are announcing it this week, and it's already set in stone. We just got to let everybody know it's happening so they can start getting excited about it.
And before I let you go, I have sort of the one project I've always wanted to ask you about and get sort of the true history once and for all of the classic scrap metal Sensitive.
Oh, boy.
For those who never heard it, it was sort of a
that one.
metal scene with the rumor that the vocals were done by a certain Jeff Scott Soto. What's the brief history of scrap metal?
Well, the idea behind that was originally to kind of emulate different artists, and even when the producer and writers, there were two writers that were coming up with that stuff, and it was just all juvenile fun. We were just having a blast, just basically laughing every time a new song was penned or finished. The idea when we recorded them, they all kind of sounded like, well, this song sounds like a David Coverdale song. This song sounds like a Motley Crue song. This one sounds like a Billy Idol song. So when we were tracking them, I did my best to actually sound like these artists. It leaked out there, or somehow somebody made up the ideal that it was those actual artists on there, but because the material was so filthy and so smutty that those artists didn't want their names put on there. So we ran with that. Somebody made that up, and we actually ran with that whole ideal and said, well, we're not saying it is that person. We're not saying it's not. And it was more of a prank kind of thing because we were actually getting away with the fact that people thought that was David Coverdale on one song, or that was Billy Idol on another, or that was Vince Neil on another. And so we were just laughing our asses off about the whole thing, but it was more of just a parody thing, kind of the way Steel Panther started, and we just kind of ran with it. And it's again, one of those classic albums based on that.
And you know you're onto something when Whitesnake and Motley Crue say, no, that's too smutty for us. So,
Right.
Jeff, just thank you again so much. Best of luck with Origami. It is out everywhere. You can stream it. You can buy it off the Soto, I believe it's sototheband.com website. And best of luck with it. I hope we can talk again when Sons of Apollo ramp back up. And we'll
I don't normally advocate illegal streaming and downloading, but even if you got to listen to it that way, check it out because it's the only. If you discover this band, I know you're going to dig it, and it's the only way you're going to see us live. So get it somehow, some way, but listen to the new Soto record.
It is a great record. All three are, but this one definitely stands out. Jeff,
Awesome.
again, thank you so much. Best of luck. Again, hope we could talk again when Sons of Apollo ramps back up and get you here doing some dates in the U.S.
Sounds good.
Thanks a lot, man.
Okay, you got it.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.